My name is Julie Maio. I'm representing the Jofi Modern School. The Jofi Foundation is our charity that funds the school. I came to be involved with the project because I run a hotel, and the people that were running the school at the time were very short of funds. And they came round looking for sponsorship from the hotels. And as I own a hotel and I have lots of staff working for me, I'd realised over the years that the education in Gambia was really seriously lacking, and they needed to improve education from the start, not just by training courses when they got to 15 or 16. So when the lady came that was running the school to help, needing help, I started helping her by finding sponsors through my guests. My guests would be interested in sponsoring schools, so we linked them one-to-one with the children in the school, and that helped to cover the school fees. When I first met Fiona and Joe, so Jofi is a combination of their name, Joe and Fiona, so Jofi. When I first met them, they were really struggling. They were trying to provide education for children in the very poor areas, living in squalor, living near the quarry, just scavenging for food and trying to live day by day. And many of the children weren't getting any education because they couldn't even afford to feed themselves. So the parents couldn't afford to feed themselves. So they really wanted to start a school, but their problem, they didn't have any funds at all. So when they started, they were still trying to run a school on a very, very tight budget, just charging a few pounds a term, just so that they could buy books and pencils and things and try to teach the children, give them a basic education. But this was very, very difficult because the families, they don't even have money to feed themselves, so there's no way they could afford school fees. And the state system in Gambia isn't any better because there's 50 to 70 children in a class. And even then, they still have to buy their textbooks and their exercise books and pencils. So all these children that can't afford those things just don't go to school, basically. So when they came looking for funds, we had the idea that we could put the guests to sponsor children, and that really worked, and it really helped, and it meant that the children could continue their education and they had some funding to sponsor the books and pencils and artwork, whatever they needed, the materials they needed, and also rent, of course, because the school premises need to be paid for. So but they were in a very dire straits. The place that they were renting at that time was really dilapidated. It didn't have a perimeter wall on it, so it didn't really meet the expectations for a children's school at all. So they really thought they were going to have to close the school by the time they met me. A friend that, or they were guests in my hotel, came to Gambia on holiday. They loved it, and they were one of the first sponsors. One of the sponsors that came to the school sponsored some children. And then when they went home, my friend now, Linda, she went and told her friend, Michelle, and Michelle is actually Chris's sister-in-law. And then I guess Michelle spoke to Chris and he wanted to get involved. So he sponsored 5 children, and that was in about 2015. And he's been sponsoring those 5 children for the last 6-7 years. And one of the children that he sponsors got to grade 6 last year, and our school doesn't go past grade 6. It's a primary school. So that meant they have to move on to the secondary school from there. And this little girl is from a very, very poor background. Her family don't have money at all. They can't afford anything. So she was very despondent because the other children in her class were going on to other schools, and she knew very well that her education was going to finish at this point because there was nowhere for her to go. So it meant that she would become a street seller, basically. So all the education she'd had up to that point was going to be wasted, and she was very low. So as it happened, I found a school nearby that were prepared to take all the children. We only had 5 in grade 6 last year because it was the first grade 6 that we that had completed the primary school. So they all took the exam, and I promised to find her a sponsor. And she passed the school exam, and I asked Chris if he wouldn't mind continue sponsoring her. But then that raised a large question, because he didn't realise that our school didn't continue through to secondary school. So that's what really started things off with Chris. Then he started asking me lots of questions. How do we cope? How do we finance ourselves? And obviously, we'd gone through a really bad time with the COVID. The COVID had devastated our sponsorship because people weren't coming to Gambia, and funds were very, very low. And so he said, okay, I'm prepared to help you get the school back on its feet, and I'm really interested in what you're doing. So that's how he really got involved. Chris asked us to produce a red, amber and green list. So that meant what was the most urgent, what we really needed to do at that time. And then amber was going to be what we really wanted to do, how to get the school to move forward. And then green would be the future, our 5-year plan. So we started with a red list. We lack water supply in the Gambia, serious water supply, and obviously with a school of 220 children, that was very, very important. So we asked if we could build a borehole. We had a borehole dug, and Chris financed that. Then secondly, we had been given some Chromebooks, but the Chromebooks were being passed from classroom to classroom, which obviously endangered them from getting ruined. They could break. So we had an idea of expanding the library and making it large enough to make it an IT room. So Chris paid for that. He gave us the money to build the IT room. And then also we were lacking things like art equipments and PE equipment, so he gave us financed that. And then also he's sponsored shoes for the children, because they're running around with hardly anything on their feet. Their shoes are just terrible. Sometimes they're 3-4 sizes too small for them. And so he sponsored shoes for everybody. We like to take the children on school trips once a year. We've always tried to do that. I've always sponsored that through the hotel. And so every year we take them to a different location so they can learn things outside of the school. Learn about their history, take them to the museums, take them to cultural sites, take them to see the animals, wild animals, take them to fishing villages. So this year, on top of the usual trips that we take them on, we took our grade 6, which is our oldest group, we took them up country, 300 miles up country, to see the slave trading port at Jofi. So that obviously was a very expensive journey for us, which we could never have afforded without Chris's help. But it was very educational. The children learnt so much, and they really enjoyed themselves. It was such a pleasure to see the children enjoying their trip and also learning at the same time. So those kind of developments for the children are really important. I mean, some of those children have never been out of Manjai, where the school is, 2 miles. I mean, even to see large shops or the bigger roads, they don't go anywhere because they don't have vehicles. They walk to school, walk back, and they stay in the compounds. So for them, these excursions are so, so important to broaden their minds. So that's the red list that we dealt with so far. And then the amber list was, what were we going to do after this year's grade 6? Last year's grade 6 were only 5 children, and we found a school that they could go to, but we couldn't continue sponsoring another school fees. For this year, we have 19 children due to leave this summer, which would be a really large amount of money, and it wouldn't be going to Jofi, it'd be going to another school. So Chris said, the best thing we can do is build our own high school. So this is where we're at now. Chris said, purchase the land, and then we'll try to find the funds. So this is where we are at. This is our forward plan. We've got our land. We found a piece of land, luckily, just within a few metres of the school that we have now. and it's just been vacated because there was some old building on there. So it's taken some time for the paperwork to go through. I've just heard this week that the land is now clear and we're ready to go. It's going to take us about a year to build. So in the meantime, we're going to work by this year's grade 6 will take afternoon classes rather than being in their own school. So we can improvise a little bit this year so that we don't lose the children, and we provide them with the education they need, and we make sure that they're getting the education at the standard that Jofi provides as well, which is also very important, because obviously part of our schooling that we're trying to provide is to European standards, it's not to African standard. A lot of the schools are just chalk and board, children sitting in a class looking at a blackboard and listening to what the teacher says. We like to teach in a European way where they experience and learn through trying themselves. We also want to make sure that we take care of the children that are not academic. Many of the children have other skills. They can be artistic, they can be good at physical education, they may be good with their hands, but they may not be academic. So, especially from the poor families, these poor families don't have the experience of education, reading books at young ages. So it's for our part, we need to improve those standards for them. A few of them will come through and surprise us with being really academic, but there's a lot of them that will never be academic, and they need to have a job at the end of it. They need to be able to work towards being able to be employed or to be employees. Learning a trade may be more important to them than the reading and writing. So the school that we want to build has got to provide all those skills. We need to build a school now that will provide the less academic children with skill centre as well as the academic children, giving them the opportunities to go on to learn. We have a lot of children that are really interested in school as well, and they want to be doctors, they want to be lawyers, some of them even want to be the president, but they need to have the opportunity and the ability to learn the subjects in school without having to pay for it. Just because they're coming from poor families doesn't mean that they don't have the right to that education. So what we're looking to do is improve the standard of the school, giving them the opportunities, equal opportunities, that every child is entitled to around the world. We want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet so that they can be the future of the Gambia. Gambia itself will never stand on its own 2 feet if it doesn't produce its own people, its own workers, the people that can construct, the people that can build. Every time we bring foreign labour in, we are losing money back to other countries. So we need now to start by a pilot school that can introduce good education, free education, and set a standard for the Gambia. So this is where we are sitting now. This is what we want to do. A Jofi School, Chris, we want to produce a school that can really stand out and be proud to say that we've able to help everybody, not just the elite.